let's just hit go live. All right, we're live. We are live. Welcome in everyone, and thanks for joining today. If you're coming in later and catching the video after the stream because of the time zone that you're in, etc., we do have episode 1 of this. So if you want to check that, there's just a few setup things that I'm going to do a recap on now. Just in case we're a little rusty, or you haven't seen the first episode, or you haven't seen the first episode in a while and you've forgotten what we used to get set up. So this is actually, you see above me there's Donatello there. So this is just a mixed media, but very light sort of. It's a collection of advanced techniques that I've used over the past few years to do mixed media, but it's only a light version, LITE version of mixed media. So it only consists of 2 components, and that is the Copic markers, or just your alcohol markers, and colored pencils. I'm using mostly Prismacolor Premier wax colored pencils, and I've just got a few more greens here in the Caran d'Ache Super Color 2 Soft, which are just a student brand. They're just a student brand budget version of their options, so which is good for you because they're actually a really nice pencil. They might be a little drier and a little harder than the Prismacolor, which is not a bad combination to have both in there. And so I also happen to have my original sketch here, so I'll show you that as well. So you've got the iPad up, so there it is there. So that is just a trace over a NECA figurine of a 1990 Jim Henson costume live movie character over a photo of the figurine. So I've said if you're just purely focusing on the color and the coloring process and the mixed media process, this is for you. So this, once again, it's a light mixed media process of only using a couple of fundamental color supplies and basic paper, which I'll tell you about, and then a sketch that we've derived from something real, such as either a real character, a real costume, a live movie outfit, or a photo of something real with real lighting, as opposed to doing a trace of somebody else's artwork, because you want to go back to the source and then you create the artwork for what you're doing, not take off from where somebody else stopped on another piece of artwork. So this is I had a couple options. There was that one there as well. Just with Donatello, he was looking, you're looking at him from the left, that portrait I did, and he's looking away. And so I didn't want to have another portrait that was the character looking straight at us. I wanted them to be a little bit more situational. So I found a photo of this figurine, and all I did was trace over it in Procreate. You could use any other program, you can do it digitally, or you could trace over it with Lightbox onto the paper that you're going to use. I'm sure you can figure that out, but all you need is a sketch, a basic sketch. As you can see, it's structurally correct. It's just an outline. You're going to focus on coloring and your coloring techniques, the mixed media process. So this is not part of that. If you want to look at character creation or anatomy or gestural drawing or sketching and all that other, that's a different study. I only have one other series that I've just started on here because I've come over from Twitch. And that other series was drama in your drawing, and that's starting off with how to build a figurine to create, like, to customize, and looking at options to make it dramatic and interesting to look at before you start putting all the detail in the design of the character. So if you want to look into that as a drawing process, that's a separate process. What we're doing today is the focus on just 3 main components that are all basic. That's your paper, your marker, and your pencils, and that's all you need really to do fan art that is enjoyable to do, to draw, and to look at. So just to cover again, this paper here is Strathmore toned grey paper. It's not very thick. I've got it stuck down to my little easel here with some, you could use tape, painter's tape, just be careful, some masking tape will actually tear the paper off. So I've just used kneadable eraser because it's really adjustable and you can stick it anywhere, and it'll hold things down. You wanna hold that paper down because it this toned paper will stretch a bit and warp a little bit. I was surprised to find that the Copic alcohol markers on this didn't really warp the page that much. When I did Donatello, which is in the little art gallery above me, you'll notice, actually no, you won't notice, I didn't use markers on him. I just drew him straight up with pencils, I think. Actually, it just reminded me now that when you do it in, this is all Copic here, and that's pencil. So we did that in episode 1 if you want to, or just the first one. It's actually not called episode 1 yet. I have to update that, but just if you want to check that out, you can do that. If you want, you can also turn me off, turn the audio off, put some music on, and put it on double speed or whatever, and you can watch me go faster and build that faster, which is a great feature that we have on YouTube now. But with Donatello, like, what I had to do before I was using markers was I had to put down a very light shading of pencil. So if you don't have markers and you're on a super budget, once you've got your pencil down, you can do a light shading, very light, not like, don't push it in. You just want to put some color on the page with your pencil, with a base color, something that's sort of average, not dark, not too light. It's okay if it's a little light, I guess, but yeah, not too dark, because then what you'll do is you'll use the process that I will be using today, whereas you take your darker shade of whatever color that you're working on top of, it's a skin tone or leather or shell, and then you'll build the textures starting with the darker colors into those parts, and then you'll add the highlight in afterwards. You can explore doing it the other way if you want, or if you want to, you can actually, when you look at my method, the Osmosis method, you'll notice that there's a textural application to this, not simply a shading. So it's not a shading. So let's get into it. Let's just start off with something relatively direct. We'll finish off the bandana, so the tie. The tied end on his left side, the other side. So I've just got a Prismacolor Premier wax pencils. These are, in my country, in Australia, they're about, I think on average they're about $3, or just under $3 each, $2.50 to $3, something like that. To me, Prismacolor Premiers are the best all-rounder. They have got vibrant color, they are blendable, really blendable, great color, blendable, you can push them around, you can, You can really work with it. That's the pros. The pro is that it is everything you want really in when you want to get going and get color down and control and blend and do some beautiful palette work and that with that. It is a really good option. The things to look out for is that it is soft. So it might actually be the softest pencil on the market. So you just got to be wary of pushing too hard. Because you can, it doesn't crumble. It can crumble if you've made the pencil too sharp as a start. But yeah, sometimes if you make it too sharp, it'll just sort of pop at the end and then drop down, as if like you busted the wheels, the tires on your car, and the car just drops down onto its rims or something like that. That'll kind of happen if you push a bit too hard. But the other thing that will happen too is that you'll actually push the pencil into your page and the wax into your page so much that it will create a thick, like a surfboard wax effect on the page, and it'll become glossy, and you'll even stretch the paper out, and what else can you do? What else can go wrong? It's really not that much. What it's telling you is to go slow and easy on it. Don't go pushing things too hard. Which is perfect for the light intro. The light intro is don't go hard as a starter. If you're getting started into traditional fan art, don't go crazy. Don't go crazy on your. Don't go too fast. Don't go too hard. Very straightforward. So it's not demanding of you. It's actually telling you to slow down, do a better quality. Yeah, so I was just using sand, and I've got some poppy red here as well. I don't know when I bought poppy red. But that's perfect for what we're doing today. It's just to rich up that orange in a couple of places. I tend to, on a lot of fan art, I tend to go just a bit richer than what the reference material is, because the goal is for it to be vibrant and fun. And when I first got exposed to this idea of fan art, I came across an artist, a tattoo artist called Andrew Wilson, and he mostly does grey wash, like silhouetted tattoos now, and he's got quite a distinct style for that approach as well. But prior to that, or during that stage, but much earlier in his career, like we're talking 10 years ago now, he was doing fan art. Obviously the skills are transferable, and he was doing all these kind of portraits, but he was doing larger face busts as well, which is what I've done up there if you have a look at the gallery. And that's what really stirred me, and it just had such great color, and I'd never seen anything like it. And we're talking 2013, I think now. So if you think back to where you were and what you were doing at that stage, there were, it wasn't new. Obviously colored pencil has been around for a long time. But it was a little bit of a revelation to me, in a way, of when I think of colored pencils, I think of elementary school, primary school quality, and just dry, uninteresting, a bit scratchy, not blended very well, very limited type execution. But when I saw this pencil, it was just like, that's everything I did not imagine pencil being capable of. So it got my attention very quickly, and now it's very prevalent. You can see this type of artwork everywhere, and particularly fan art. I don't do this full time. I don't do this as my primary art method or focus. I've got a couple of other techniques as well. I'm currently spending hundreds of hours on digital ink, just because it's such a obviously pure black and pure white, just beautiful contrast in digital black, and the use of that is both great for portraiture and also visual storytelling in that. So you can build, you can often, like for visual storytelling such as graphic novels and comic books, you can do a lot of color, but you kind of can't do it without the pencil or the ink. So it's very fundamental. Like you can do ink and then not do color, and you'll be able to tell the story, but not having the structure and just working straight with color is, I don't know. I don't know anyone who does that outside of concept art and character art and environmental design. I don't know anyone who does full narratives without doing the pencil work. Yeah, I think Alex Ross was probably the only person I can think of who's probably done some light penciling, but the whole thing is painted. Like for example, was it called Kingdom Come? It's a painted novel of DC, which is insane. Like every panel, I think it's acrylic paint. I don't think it's oil, which is just astounding. To think that painting is mostly used for portraiture, right? Single pieces, cover art, books, obviously just straight up paintings and specialty pieces and that specialty art. But yeah, this guy, he's painted the whole novel, the whole trade. Alright, so I'm just gonna catch you up on some of the techniques that I'm using in a second. I'm just looking at some compositional things between what I've done and the reference art, which is just the photo I showed you before. Well, that's all I'm following. This is probably one of those points where some of these areas are going to get a little hard to add detail to, because the page gets what I call waxed. It is wax pencil, it is a waxing process, but I call it waxed as in like it's had diminishing returns. You're not really going to get much more color onto it. You're not going to be able to really control the detail because it's been waxed. And it just becomes thick, smooth, or bumpy, but it's not adhesive. You can't really draw on it, and you do, it just blends more of the colors together, and you get less and less detail, less control. So part of the necessity is to go slow and think about building layers up and preventing yourself from becoming a little too impatient or overzealous or too heavy on the brush. Right now I'm trying to just add a little rendering in here where it gets a little darker around the bottom of the shoulder, while negotiating the textures. So I'm jumping in and out of the texturing that I've already put on there. So let's talk about the texturing. So the texturing process, you'll notice the neck in particular, but the shoulders, the face and that, it's quite fine. You can see more of it in person, which is just a bonus for having the original art, or maybe getting a print, where you can see like a good scan or something like that, or a photo where you can actually see that detail. So bonus for being in person, and at least for you as an artist who is doing art and retaining the original, you get the joy of seeing your work up close and detailed. But all I'm saying is that this is a little bit more detailed than what you can see in the camera, because I've got a stream cam, not a HD video photography camera not at this stage. Still in the process of setting up a new studio, which is happening. This is just a temporary setup, but you'll notice that there is texture and detail in there, and even just the way that I'm stroking and dabbing and that onto the work as it is. You'll see that it's not just scrubbing, it's not just filling in what's there, it's working in and around all that texture that's currently in place, and just treating it very cautiously, looking for opportunities in the reference material, and then coming back to the painting, the portrait, and just updating it. The Caran d'Ache Super Color is a little harder and a little more reliable when waxing occurs, because they're just a little drier, a little harder, a little sharper, and it gives you a chance to add a bit more in. So if you only have Caran d'Ache Super Color, you're fine. If you only have Prismacolor, you'll be fine. You just got to think ahead, go easy. Obviously higher cost, higher quality pencils just will offer you just a little bit more control and color, depending. Like, not all higher cost pencils are going to suit what you're doing. For example, if you see The Witcher appear above me, try and get rid of that green screen, guys. Oops, hang on a second. I pulled my light out. Yeah, if you see the Witcher appear, it's used Caran d'Ache Pablo, which is an oil-based one, and you'd think it'd be a little bit nicer to work with, a little bit smoother or something, but no. I don't know why that green screen's been a funny boy. I'm just gonna edit that just quickly. Just bear with me, please. Yes, I didn't make any changes. There it is. It's just the daytime. We got the day off today. It's our Anzac Day, so it's remembering the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, particularly relating to this World War I and II efforts. Actually, any war that our country has been in. Because you do that throughout the day and talk to people that you know that have been in the military and listen to them. But I'm on a daytime slot at the moment, so the lighting in here is just a little bit different to what's normal. All right, so let's talk about the stance method, which is something that I'm currently using for my techniques. So the stance method, or the osmosis method, is using a buzzword or a texture or some single word or single image reference to help you repeat a certain technique that is going to produce the texture of the surface that you're currently drawing. So I'm going to put my I've got a pad with extra page on it. There we go. Here it is. Alright, so this is the paper too, by the way, if you just want to see what the branding looks like. Toned grey Strathmore. The one with this girl on the front who's really impressed with them drawing her toned grey. It is thin. It's 118 GSM. Paper, so it is thin. So the good thing about alcohol markers is that they dry up quick enough, so if you don't go too hard on them and you let them dry between layers, you won't get much distortion in that page at all. It's pretty good. Don't use watercolor as a backing though, because that's going to cause you trouble. So this is just a quick one. So the technique that I'm using for Donatello, all the turtles' skin, is the stance. I've called this particular stance the C stance, for example, because the light is coming in from this direction, for example. So they've got these. If we look at the side view of their skin's got all these little turtle bumps on it. So they're all these little round bumps. So when the light's coming from this way, you're going to see the shadow on the other side of it. So if I take a while just to draw one bump on the skin, you end up with something that looks like the letter C. You could do, I'm doing crescent moon stance, you know, if you like a bit of poetry in the stance. Or I just say C stance. I'm drawing the letter C over and over and over. And what that does, obviously I'm not doing it this big on Michelangelo because his scale is much smaller. This is zoomed in, so you can see, no pun intended. And the further it gets away from the light, the thicker the lines are, the thicker the shadow is. So we get further away from the light when we're going around the, the face, for example, and it just gets thicker until there's sort of nothing left at all. But I'm still drawing that C stance shape. I'm staying true to my stance because the whole skin is going to go like that. I may end up drawing a reverse C and going back the other way if by the time I get past that line of occlusion, which is the darkest part of the face with the shadow. There's a source of light here, there's a source of light there, and then you end up with this shadow that sort of skims in between that line of occlusion, and then the light starts coming from the other direction. So after that point, I start to rotate my C stance the other direction, so the light's coming from the other way. But this is basically it for this. You could do all sorts of other stances. For example, over here, I did infinity stance, so it's literally just constantly drawing infinity loops, and it's a real mess because I might use it for, say, wool, or like woolen collar or woolen texture or something like that, and so just something really sort of scruffy and rough and bushy, that kind of thing. And I just get thicker and thicker and tighter and heavier as we go down. And then when we go up the top, I still follow the same pattern, the same stance, but I just get lighter and lighter and a little sketchier and really kind of loose and lazy on it until I get closer towards the light. And that's what I'm doing, as opposed to just shading in. Because like when you're just doing this, everything ends up with the same texture. pencil texture. So if you want to use my technique, like there is a texture in that thanks to the pencil and the paper, the tooth or the surface quality of the paper, but you're kind of like all your rendering will end up looking like that. Every surface, like the shell, the skin, the material, the wood, everything will end up looking the same texture, and the character does not have the same texture. It just depends what you want. My technique, which is what this stream is about applying a stance to each material with the colors that are used in that. So you're combining a physical technique application of the correct color, the correct tone and shade, or the one that you want, that you've chosen, and you're using that stance in order to help remind you I'm applying myself this one way, this one method with this color until I've given the volume and the shape in the rendering of that character or that part of the character. And that's how I end up with both texture and tone and lighting. Texture, color, lighting equals unique, interesting fan art that you want to just sort of look at because it feels surreal, it feels sub-real in that it really is kind of playful and interesting and tangible. Like it sticks out off the page. It looks a little less like pencil and more like the character. That's just what I like, and that's why I call this my technique. I noticed other artists after I got into this well and truly a long time ago when I started. I'm going to use a scratch hatch stance here, which is from comic book art of hatching. I just kind of feel like that speaks best for the texture of the shell. I might actually go, shell stance, because that stroke and that hand movement and that in the technique is so much associated with the shell. But I don't draw turtles that much, so I have more universal terminology for that. But very early on, I was looking at my reference images and thinking, oh man, look at the skin tone in that shot. Look at the hair, like the facial hair. Look at the skin texture or the texture in. I did Raphael a long time ago. I'm going to go back the other way now. Same hatching technique, a hatching stance, or same stance, using a hatching sort of technique. But I'm going to use this cool blue, light blue here because the lighting from the right is blue. So I'm going to get that bounce, that cool bounce lighting on this side, and then warm fill on the other side. And that's just going to blend in with the textures of the actual shell color. I noticed as it gets in the reference image, the further it gets up towards the top, the blue is mixed in with the brown so much that it turned green. So I can just skip the process of trying to blend those two colors together and then just put green in. But I'm going to be a little bit more chemical and use both the blue and the brown followed up by the green. Just going to do some outlining up here. I've just sort of lost some of the shape. It might be a little bit bigger than what's in the reference image, but I just want to finish it off because this isn't going to have a background. I need it to be tidy. We'll talk about the shading in a second. Again, we'll recap over shading. So now I'm getting both. This green is blending with the brown and the light blue that's already there, and also I guess the marker that we first put down, and the toned grey paper. The green, I'm looking at the reference image, the green actually takes effect. The blue brown green mixture has effect all the way down there. I'm making sure that I don't start scrubbing in the other way, because that would be most comfortable for me to go this direction, because that's the way that the shell and my hand or arm movement might work, but that's not the texture of the shell. So I have to stick with the stance. That's why I've chosen that unique word, is because in martial arts or like samurai sword fighting and that, the stance is such a concrete and fundamental component. Like the way that you stand, the way you hold your weapon is imperative to how you will be performing for your life. It's a very specific, very extreme circumstance to be in, and that's why like art is martial art, sword fighting, and that fighting for your life is a very appropriate metaphor or an analogy to work with, because you're talking about something that has to be so specific for the life of the person, for the life of the art. You have to do something to guarantee the quality of the outcome. Otherwise, it'll start to sort of droop and die on you, like a bleeding samurai who has lessened the vigilance of his stance. So that's why I use that word, is because it becomes so. It came to me quite like I when I first started doing it, I didn't have any terminology. I thought, oh, this is just the way I do it. But then when I started communicating it to other people about what I'm doing exactly, I had to choose a term, and that one came to mind very quickly. I think too, it might have came to me before. Yeah, actually, it did come to me before Ghost of Tsushima. If you played that game, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's an amazing third-person action game. I highly recommend it. It's a high-quality game. But yeah, there's 4 different stances in that for sword fighting in the game, derived from the art of samurai fighting. I've gone a little far up on that shell up there. I'll leave it for now until later, but what you can do is take a pencil that looks a little bit like the background color, or perfectly like the background, like a beige, or a warm grey, light grey, and then just sort of chisel away at that. If you're just handing out some prints or whatever, you can edit that in Photoshop before you print. Alright, that's coming up alright. For me to get an idea of if I need to adjust this part of the shell, I need to do this part of the shell, which has got a little bit more exposure on it. I call that compositional support, which is what you want to do if you don't know if you should adjust what you've done. What you need is compositional support. So if you do an area and you go, I don't know if the shoulder's too flat, if it's round enough, if it's too bright, if I haven't put enough shadow on it. If you're in that full, like that teetering fulcrum, like you don't know which way to swing, you need compositional support. So you come back to it later, do some more of what you might have a better idea at. Fill in, do the basics, do your first pass on the rest of it, and then see how that composition of more of your character, how that turns out. And what you might need to do in order to get that looking balanced, you know, for the volume of that body or something, you know, like whatever it is that you need. Compositional support. I'm sticking with my stance here. I'm just doing just a single hatching out from the center of the body, of his body, to create that ribbed, textured, sort of aged effect that we see in turtle shells. I could probably just scratch a little bit, a few in, just to undulate, just to create a bit of asymmetry. As a thing in general, I aim for asymmetry as much as I can. Keep it interesting. When you start to introduce straight lines into your piece, they can really stand out from all of your organic stuff. So if you look at his weapons here, I adjusted this because on the figurine, because it's very light and hands are a little loose, the figurine had the nunchuck handle going off this way, and then the connecting tie, or we call it rope or chain there, was sort of going off, and it didn't look strong. So I adjusted it in my drawing to go straight up, sort of straight through there, in order to make it look a little stronger, because built, manufactured, straight-edged items in an organic setting or against an organic major feature can really stand out. So you want to make sure that they're measured, they're lined up, they're straight, they're strong. Unless you've got a bit of movement in there, like when you swing a golf club, the golf club actually bends. Artists often bend rigid items in visual art and visual storytelling in order to capture the moment of maybe like a bow staff bending or a golf club bending, or just the extremity of the circumstance of things really getting pulled around, and making sure that sort of the reader is getting that idea. As I said earlier, this is not what I do full time. I am doing this because I haven't done it in a while. I've got Donatello done, I think it was 2 years ago, and I wanted to do the rest of the turtles, and I've been doing a lot of digital ink, and I needed a second project. So on my off time when I wasn't drawing, that I needed something else, a different method, something to keep it a little fresh. And I tell you, it really does help. I'm gonna go back to my stance here because I've sort of broken my stance there, and I'm losing the texture. I am gonna use a contoured line here, a drawn line just up there, just to make sure that when it comes to the crunch of separating the shell from the side of the back of the shell, the half shell, to the side of it there, that there is a taut line. Actually, the detail of that is quite enshadowed. There's a word for you. There's a little bit of a... Cool. Bit loose there. Okay, just scratched that a little bit there. I can fix that up. Good thing about wax is that if you overdo something, you can tidy it up. Because if you've gone light enough, you can sort of fix stuff up a little bit. I'll do a quality pass on this again later. Okay, which one did I use? I think I can use a bit of this dark brown. I haven't actually shaved it down yet. don't think it's a lot darker than what I've already done. Just to make sure I outline that there. Yeah, it's not a lot darker than what I've got. I do need to darken this up a bit according to my reference, and I like to try to capture the lighting that's occurring in a photographed reference, because real lighting is so powerful for any type of art. Like, it just makes illustrative characters, manga, anime, realism, illustrated realism, like real lighting makes everything look good if you can figure it out, if you can notice it, capture it, apply it. It can be such a powerful companion, powerful tool to have. I am drawing a little straight line here on the edge there. I'm just rotating the pencil as well every couple of scratches there, because the pencil wears down, and then I'm rotating it to another side that's a little sharper than the one I just... than the side I just used. And when you get to a point where none of the sides are sharp anymore, you can just sharpen it up a little bit, but not to like a pinpoint, just enough to get some control back. You do that for the black as well. The finer your lines are for points and opportunities of detail, the better. Like, if you draw really fat lines for certain parts, it does sort of reduce the realism aspect of it. So you want really kind of subtle component, like touches. Take your time to grab that opportunity. And sometimes you have to just scrub the pencil just for a few seconds for it to start to wear in, get grip, and then wear in. The more color you put on the page, the harder it gets. And then just add some little opportunities where there's a shadow. There might be an opportunity for light. It's a compounding opportunity. I'm going to darken this up a little bit with this Dahlia purple, even though the shell is brown. So we're going to talk about lighting with colors. This is a bit of color theory for you, which I'm sure you can handle. So when you want to get darker, don't reach for the black, not just yet, because the sooner you introduce black, the sooner you introduce, the quicker you reduce the quality of the color. So introducing black or white is a desaturating process. Saturation meaning the tonal quality, the richness of the color, the purity of the color. When you bring in white, it thins out that color and goes brighter. When you bring in the black, it thins out that color and goes darker, because there is no color between white and black and all the grays in between. You might have a cool grays and warm grays, which will just tilt things towards different lighting. When that happens, but it will strip the color. It will blend in a substance that will reduce the quality of that and the richness of that color. So just bear in mind that when you want to get darker, there's two things you can do There's actually three. Actually, there's three things you can do when you want to get part of your character darker, part of your work darker, and that is introduce a darker shade of the same hue, for example. All right, so you just go, all right, I'm going to make it darker. I'm going to choose the same palette, the same tonal palette of green, where it gets darker. So they've added maybe more pigment, or a couple of other pigments into this to create this that produce the same the same hue. Hue meaning which color. So this orange here is darker than the green, but it's a different hue. Whereas this green here is darker than the light green, but it's the same hue. Then you have something like this, for example, where this has got more yellow in it, this has got more blue in it, so the hue is a little off, right? So you can introduce the same hue, but it's a darker shade to get your rendering, and that is the most common technique. The second one is what I just did a second ago, which is to introduce a different color as well as a darker shade, such as, so these are two different hues, but they're complementary. This is actually the opposite color of this in terms of the color wheel. So if I combine these together, I think in a digital mix, it ends up like a mid-tone gray. It doesn't go gray so much as it goes probably like a reddish color. But the mid-tone will be like a averaged out tone of it, right? And I've introduced this purple, as you can see up here. So his skin tone is somewhere in between these two here. And I've introduced this color to make it darker, as well as the darker green, and that's what you end up with. It allows the lighting in the world to interact with his skin tone and to reflect or reduce the amount of light in a way that is tonally interesting to look at, tonally rich, as opposed to just introducing black. If I use black in this area instead, it would go more monochromatic and more desaturated, and it would have a colder, starker look. That might be what you're going for. That's black up there above it. That's black. That is the Dahlia purple, a dark, slightly reddish purple, grapey in there, and that's the difference between it. If I mix this black in with that green to darken the skin, it would lose the green out of it, and it would start to go grayish and kind of dead. So if you want to make a zombie, a real, like a Walking Dead zombie, no sort of Hollywood glam to it and vibrance, you would probably want to go with your core colors and darken and lighten with grayscale colors, and use less, so the skin tones and the palette looks more dead. And again here I'm using a bit of what is this, electric blue? I'm using a bit of electric blue in the brown just to mix in the cooler lighting on the right side of his body with the color of the shell. And I'm just scrubbing backwards and forwards where the line of occlusion is. There, because it's actually quite, the lighting is quite dull on this part of the photo. I'm just going to use the back of the pencil there to try and scratch. Oh yeah, by the way, also, if you want to brush the crumbs off your page, use a cheap brush. I would recommend synthetic as well, so it doesn't get any grip and it doesn't stick to the brush as well. And don't use your hand, because your hand is a little moist, a little sweaty, and it will catch and drag your crumbs, your pencil crumbs, across the page and dirty it up, which is a look in itself. If you want that look, just you want full like raw, dirty, meaty looking page that's been really roughed up and used and crummy and sort of like swept. Use your hand like that, and you will get scratches and a dragging of colors off the page, off the character and along the page. Getting a bit stubborn down here, getting that color in. Sometimes it's weird, like it's like the quality of the paper, or like just in somewhere on the paper. I don't get much with this type of thing, but I can't remember what paper it was. But sometimes you'd hit this little slick, like this little polished part in the pulp, and it just nothing sticks to it for some reason. Or you got a little bit of oil on it, or something, bug splatter or something, and it won't stick. So as you can see up here, I'm getting just a mixture of colors, a little frizzettery in that sense that you can see some black and some purple, crimson, and like this murky greeny type color, and then the electric blue and some texture in there as well. Just using the one stance, pretty much stroking out, fanning out from the center of his body in order to create the textures there. If I really wanted to, I could, you know, like this is a pass you can do after you've done most of the work. You kind of take a deep breath in, you have a look at your page, at your whole character, and you go, you know what, it's good, but I'm just gonna like grab this extreme pencil here. I'm gonna sharpen it up, and I'm coming real easy, real slow, and I'm just going to etch here and there along the very edge of the shell, and I'm gonna keep an eye on the sharpness of the pencil. And I'm just gonna look at, not on that side, I'm gonna look at giving a little bit of something into the very edge of that, and not go overboard, just add a little zest, like putting some, you know, pepper on your tomatoes. And then I might go to the other side, so the warm light's coming from the left, and there's just a little bit of exposure on the right side of the body at certain high points on the left side of the high points, not the right side of the high points, which I just did the high side on the right now with the cool light. So I can grab a warm tone. This is very light, so it's going to be quite strong. And I'm just going to come in very easy and just add just a little bit there, and just a little bit of texture there in this line of occlusion where the light is coming across this side, missing that dip in the side of the body, and then catching on the far side of the shell here that's just a little bit further out. And if I can get some nice and like very fine lines into that, it will show that this art has some fidelity, like some finer, higher fidelity type, you know, realizations and opportunities in there. And it's just sort of catching the light, and it's catching certain details there on a fine level. So it's something you can do, you know, throughout the process if you want to sort of change things up a little bit, or you can do it towards the end. So this is just adding, yeah, see, I've got a couple of like nice little dry sharp etches in there. which just shows just a little bit of finer detail rather than thicker blending. And that's what I'm looking for, is just adding some tight, fine lines in there to convince me that this isn't just a fat, ham-fisted rendering. There's actually some attention to detail in there, and just giving it a little bit more than don't just render, spice it up, you know. Yeah, that's working really well, and you can do that infinitely. So if you remember that whole sort of, I guess, a little bit of the 80-20 rule, like you can spend 20% of the time doing 80% of the work, and then 80% additional time doing 20% upgrades to your work. Like, when you've done all the rendering to this quality, the more time you spend on it after that is going to be sort of less. You're doing less, you're spending more time doing less, but and it never ends, right? It's art doesn't ever end. You can keep on meddling with something, but you're also learning less, I think, as well. The more you work on the same piece of art, the less you learn, because you've got less and less to do. So there's this less challenge, less information that you're putting down, less information that you're ingesting. I think that was one reason one way of identifying when it's time to stop working on something is when you're actually not learning anything more from it. Often people use that as a career progressor, an indicator of when it's time to move on, is when you've got nothing really left to learn from the job that you're doing, and some people just keep on moving because they want to keep on learning and growing. It's part of their vitality, right? I'm just doing some slithers of black here, very little, because remember the black reduces the tonal quality. I'm just using it to etch out the very edge of the line between a light and a dark, or where there might be a crevice or something. Just adding just a tiniest bit here and there. I'm not going to go too much further than that, just because it will overthrow. You need to keep black in your holster when you want a real showdown. You don't want to use it all the time, unless you're doing a large negative sort of piece, negative look. I'm just gonna just dab or stipple in a little bit there, just to blend it off a little bit, just to increase the gradation, and then just add a little bit more sort of stipple there, stipple stance. In comic books, you don't really have so much of a stance. You just have stippling, hatching, cross hatching, and fill, and then line weight is like how heavy you go doing all of those things, right? Whereas in you can actually apply stance technique to comic book art as well. So for example, I will show you, I've got two types of art here. Let me just show you an older turtle on my iPad. So that there is just using mostly hatching and cross hatching and fill, and then line weights. So thinner lines towards the light, thicker lines towards the shadows. That's Ronin, the last Ronin, just a little artist card I did a while back now, a couple of years ago. That's commonly used ink for for comic art. Here is what I'm doing now using stance. This is the latest project I'm working on. This is using my stance technique. So I'm using cross-hatching, hatching, like a crescent, contour hatching, Morse code, so longs and shorts, stippling, and textural other stance techniques with different strokes that replicate the kind of textural qualities. Plus I've thrown in a halftone to change the base shade for an entire type of material, such as Deadpool's Kevlar and body leather suit, and that. I've got to finish the rope off yet. That's the last thing to do. But if you look at all the texture that's in this here, this is all having more of a mentality, a stance mentality, because it's not just the stroke, it's the collections of strokes. So if you see in the hammered finish of Wonder Woman's knee armor there, knee pad thing, there's all these very basic little patches of football shape, pineapple shape type, or manga eye silhouette type shapes there, with diminishing line work towards the light and a thickening line work and cross-hatching or cross-hatched stance work over top of the previous layer in order to get it darker. So that's using my technique in digital ink. So it doesn't have to be, and this is all the same technique that I'm using in pencils here, because you're producing texture with a stroke of whatever you're holding in your hand. If it's your Apple Pen, or if it's a marker, or inker, brush, or a pencil, it's the same. You can change the tool out, but the thing that remains the same is this dynamic mindset, this dynamic method for applying all that stroke technique to the different materials that you'll see in the world, in your fan art. So if you have a look closely here on Wonder Woman, she's got a fingerprint Morse code type hatching and or technique, and then stippling in there as well, plus some cross hatching in there depending on what it is. And then I've done some negative stippling and Morse code up in the shadows in order to give there a little bit more vibrance in the shadowing, because she's such a vibrant feminine, yet strong, obviously. Like, we know her character and that, but she's very feminine in that sense as well. So very light Morse code stance in the skin tone, because she's gone with the fair skin to set her off. There's going to be Thor sitting to her left, laughing and having an ale and not paying attention at all to what's going on here. But this is all the same technique that I'm using in my colored work. This is just the difference between black and white and color. So black and white is obviously incredibly contrasting and very strong, and it draws your attention to the detail, whereas color draws your attention to the tones, the details in the tones, as opposed to details in the strokes. But yeah, it's the same technique. That's what I'm currently doing. That's my current background project. I'm almost finished Deadpool there, so that will give me 4 out of 14 characters. So much here. Obviously some base halftones in here for Bucky, a couple of different ones, or 3 or so different ones that I've used for him, but then a whole handful of different stance techniques and strokes and that right up here. Like, for example, going back to this classic hatching, but I've done it very thick and then of course the solid shadow just has a wavy line on it, and then I've cut the sections of shapes using a negative drawing, like erasing and that there. And then if we come over to, you look at the difference between Bucky's metal arm there and Rocket's hand. I love how Rocket's hand turns out there. In fact, I really enjoyed Rocket because I love Frank Frazetta's ink style, and that just has that written all over it. That glistening, hairy, you know, or what do you want to call it? Like hormonal, because it's hairy. Hormonal hatching. And the face and all that turned out really well. I was very happy with that. It was very repetitive. Obviously, you know, doing fur stance. I have done. I would have to say I've done, on very little work, I have done probably close to 1 million strokes. That's not much in the grand scheme of a professional's like 20-year career to date. Like, they would have done more just doing regular hatching and comic book hatching, but only in the past year I've probably close to I'm well over 500,000 strokes, and I'm so happy I don't have RSI or arthritis in my hands at all. I just don't, even though when I first started out, I definitely had, when I was doing study drawing and that, I definitely had like beginners RSI and pains and that, which was, it really drilled into me like an aspect of pain in art that was physical, not so much mentally. I could probably put a little bit darker shadow on his tool bag there where his left hand is. I'll do that. But yeah, when you've done it 100, like Bucky, I'll just show you just quickly. We'll go back to color because that's what you're here for. But this one has 77,000 strokes on it in 45 hours, right? I've done Wolverine as well. So we go down to Marvel here. This was the first one that I really worked this out. So you've got two different leathers, a finer leather, a rougher cracked leather, the skin tone, the facial hair, eyes, and then you've got the other stuff. You've got leather gloves, metal claws, matte leather belt buckle with polished metals on that, more skin tone, and then the torso and that, biceps, all that, different strokes, different stances, different approaches, all applied to real world lighting references, and then a couple of influences from John Byrne, Wolverine, and my own execution of the gloves. And that's all. That was their 189,000 strokes or something, just him alone. So it, and the texture in the skin there. Sorry guys, just freezed for a second. Froze. If you look at the craquula leather stance, that is, I just call it hexagonal. So I would draw a hexagonal, but very organically, very loosely, not very accurate, but I would roughly give myself around about 5 or 6 sides to draw, to create those sections of the leather, the little crevices in the leather, and I would get worse and worse at it towards the light and more partial. So I might still count the sides in when I'm drawing, but I'll just skip a couple and then come back into it towards the light and just get weaker and weaker on the pencil, lighter on the weight, towards the light, heavier towards the shadow, and then when I get to the shadow, I then do a negative work where I just basically the same thing, but I erase it into the shadow, the solids pot. So this is all the same. Everything here is the same techniques as I'm showing you today on colored pencil. Obviously, this guy is Wolverine's like full size, and this guy here, as you can see, the whole thing is just a bit bigger than my hand if I stretch him out all the way down to the legs. So yeah, the dots that I'm doing are an entire hex. You know, one stipple, one dot in here is an entire drawn hex on the leather in Wolverine's there. So I've had to zoom out on the amount of detail that I'm doing and temper that level if you want to, if you really like that high-end realism. Yeah, you just have to make your image bigger. Alright, so I'm just looking at the side of the shell here. I just want to build a little bit of support around here. This is going to come up really nice as well. It did on, if you have a look at Donatello when he appears, I can bring that up as well. It came up really nicely last time we did it. We've got a on the Instagram. If you want to see any of this up closer and a little bit more detailed, it's available on Instagram. But this is the leather and the shell work that came up quite nicely for Donatello. And what I'm going to do is just compare what I've done on Mikey to Donnie, and then just see if I need to adjust. What I noticed straight up is that I have used like warm lighting on the left, cool lighting on the right, but I've used more black. If you look at the skin tone there, I've used more black towards the shadow, whereas in Mikey I've used more Dahlia purple in the shadows. So if I want to, Donnie's skin tone is darker and more desaturated than Mikey's. Similar hue, but Mikey's a little bit more sunshine in his skin tone. What I can do towards the end of it is adjust the contrast as well. And if I'm just gonna keep them sort of different, I can also just, when I do a printout of it, I can adjust the contrast there as well. Not too much, but just a bit. Yeah, but the leather texture on the elbow pads there came up really well, so that's something I want to keep. I also just noticed that the belt that he has the rim around it, so I just want to make sure I put that in Mikey's as well, that the top and the bottom, the trim on it's just a little what do you call it, embossed, edged there. But yeah, Donnie came up great, and I give away my art for free in my workplace, just as a share and care thing. And yeah, anytime I just print out Donnie, he flies off the table. So for this shell here, it's got like a mottly waxy candle sort of feel to it, which is very simple. So that's just going to be like a circular scrubbing sort of stance. So to me, it's kind of like a wax on, wax off sort of stance. What are we going to go here? I'm going to put, sorry, I got some cat hair or something. I'm going to put some green into it now. I'm going to start off light. If in doubt, go light. So I've just got this, I don't even know what it is. I think green apple green Prismacolor. And I'm just going to do like a figure 8 sort of wax on, wax off sort of effect here. Which means, so if you've got the pencil leaned over like this, just so that it doesn't scrub any lines into the shell, because what I'm looking at on the reference is that it just has these like little inconsistent sort of bumps and highs and lows, and there's nothing. It looks kind of like smooth and bumpy and that. Hi Red, how you going? Welcome in. Thanks for saying hi. So I'm just going to replicate that in how I approach this guy here. We're just doing Mikey today and some colored pencil. Feel free to ask any questions if you need. I'm just going to use a little bit of dark. So he's gone a little green. Then I've got a bit of, actually no, before I use that one, because that's Karen Dutch, that's a little harder, I'm going to use the Premiere Grass Green. Hold the pencil a little further back. Just check the shadow. It's a little shadowed towards the bottom. And I'm just going to do a little wax on process here. Very, very slow. And it gets darker towards the shell because it's ducking away from the light. So I'll just put a little bit more in there. Hey, thank you very much. Hey, one thing I can't do is what you do, so stick with it because you have something unique to offer the world that nobody else can do. All I'm sharing today are some techniques that you might be able to use. I've done an episode before this, and today is the second episode for traditional fan art. I'm just using colored wax pencils here to get to build this fan art, build this color out. I've had a few years experience with it now, and there's some techniques here that might actually really empower your sense of creativity. I'm using a process called that I made called stance, and that is when you think of one word or one texture, like sheep's wool, or the figure 8, or the letter C, or something that helps you create that pattern over and over again to create the texture on your work. You're painting digitally for a comic like Alex Ross, so any tips? Painting digitally, right? Yeah, I do have some. Everyone has their own sort of look. I'll show you something. We've got my iPad here as well. I do digital art as well. I've been a digital artist for 28 years. A variety of different works. So I'm working with a friend of mine called Floating Disc, and he's doing a comic on Procreate as well. So he's doing digital coloring. So I'll show you what the ink looks like without the color. There we go. So this is my approach to coloring digitally, or where there may be ink involved. If you don't have ink, that'll be a little bit different again. But if there's ink involved, or drawing of like there's line work in there, as opposed to this one here where the line work disappears underneath the color. Like Alex Ross obviously has a colored finish, no line art in his. So that might, if you're doing more like this, we'll just come back to this and we'll talk about how you can just basically bring in either two options for digital. So this is Floating Disc's art here, this graphic novel, and we both have the same coloring illustrative comic book, what do you want to call it, taste. And that is that the thing that defines the image and the shape and of the page, the shape, the rendering, the depth is in the ink. Where the color, when I come in as a colorist to add color to his work, I'm going to be very careful not to render or airbrush any sort of shape into it. Because if I do that, my color is going to fight the ink, and the ink is the structural integrity of the page. Color is about the mood and emotion and vibrance of it. So if you notice on all of my color, all I've done is a gradient from the bottom to the top, whether it's darker to lighter or a darker color to a lighter color that's a little bit different. I've just used a brush that's just a little bit textural, just to give it a little bit more, just a little bit of something, a little bit of texture. But the secret is not really a secret. The key is gradient. So a subtle gradient from the top of that part to the bottom. Every single thing on this page is a gradient. If you look at his ears, gradient at the bottom, so it's a little darker, a little more saturated at the bottom, lighter and desaturated towards the top. His earpiece here, lighter at the bottom, more gold at the top. The wall, bluer away from the light, a little, and then a little yellower towards the back of the light, but not too, like, obvious, but not too much. The heroes is in the shadow, but just towards the kneecaps there, a little purple, and then towards the top, more crimson, darker, because she's got black skin. So everything has that sort of approach to it. The ground as well, a little pink and purple in the shadow, but then lighter and cooler or something, or warmer towards the bottom. Always gradients. No rendering, no 3D airbrushing, no creating shapes in the colors, only flat gradient all the way up. Okay, so if you're aiming for photorealism, I can recommend two things. Hang on a second. So you can attempt to do digitally what I'm doing traditionally. Let's just have a look at... So I can recommend on Patreon, Dave Raposa for that. So this is his Patreon. If you want to see all of his work and tips and hints, he's a digital artist, a comic artist, and a cover artist and concept artist and character artist and so on for 20 years. And he has a much better digital coloring guide for realism, and he shows you how it gets more. This is a little the character is obviously a fantasy character, but in terms of the technique, it's not gradient. He's actually rendered the shape and the volume of the character out of the ink and into the shape of the body using that, and it's very tasteful and it's very good. So Dave Raposa on here on YouTube, definitely follow Dave Raposa. He streams once a week, I think. He answers questions, and he has a $5 Patreon. Heaps of videos on realism, digital realism, so that will be really advantageous for you. I really like him. He's very honest. He's very practical. He's encouraging. He's very intelligent. He's very descriptive. Obviously, he's put a lot of work into it. I'm just trying to find you another example. There's another example of the process for him building digital art. So I've got all these layers, and then obviously the quality at the end is what you want to build towards. And he has a lot of realism or fantasy realism in there that's really tasteful. So when I said, like, don't render color in 3D, that's a rule with comic book inking, whether it's digital or traditional. But if it's a colored piece like this traditionally, like Alex Ross's painting, or digitally like this, obviously you want to get all your detail from the color work and not from the drawing or the ink. The drawing disappears underneath all that color. So I can highly recommend Dave Raposa's videos on YouTube here. Follow him, and then you'll find all his links and resources, Dave Raposa there. that will really help you. And I'm giving a shout out to a guy who's helped, just passively helped me, and he's great to hang out with as well on YouTube and just listen to. So that's an opportunity for you. There probably are other things that you can take from how I apply myself. I use Procreate. I don't know about you, but I use Procreate to do digital work, and it's the same technique. It's just that you can get what I'm doing in an instant with a brush, whereas in traditional, I have to do all the work myself, bit by bit. Just going to go back to my reference image. I can also highly recommend looking at figurines in the flesh or photos of them so you can see the real lighting. That would probably be my #1 tip if you're doing traditional, digital, anything real. Lighting is going to be the thing that really helps you out. And yeah, making sure that you're referencing. So this guy here, I'm referencing this photo of Michelangelo. It's a NECA figurine based off of, very accurately off the movie character. And the real lighting is what makes all the difference to your work. Yeah, so that's probably obviously a tutorial or a guide that you can follow very closely who does digital specifically. But one of the key things that both, Alex Ross, if you I'm sure you're aware, he will have models come into his studio and he'll get photos of them, and he uses real references, real photography, real lighting. He'll spend a while organizing the lighting in order to get the best look out of his paintings, because he will have that photo sitting right next to him. Like I've got my iPad sitting right next to me, showing me how to do real lighting, and that will give you the best reference. That will give you the very best reference for the color you're putting down, because it's telling you how to render. It's giving you the answers. And when a person looks at it, once it's been done, they're going, I believe what I'm seeing, because I believe it's more real, because the fundamental exposure of it is following reality. That has been something that has been like a staple, an underrated staple. Oh yeah, so yeah, the black and white tweets to really focus like old school filmmaking, like noir, like Mad Max black and chrome. You get to see the high end lighting. Absolutely, that's a really good idea as well. Looking at black and white versions, references as well, can only help you. If you need help with, because I think as well is that you can do what's called I forget the name of it. A grisaille, which is French term used for. I can't remember what the word itself means, but it's grayscale, I think is what it means. But grayscale is referring to art that's done, like painting that's done in grayscale, and then afterwards they used a watered down color or a oiled down paint, and they paint that over top of the grayscale painting to add color to it, to make it look to give the skin color and all that. But they do all the lighting and everything in black and white. So you might, that some artists did that and just did straight color. You might find both techniques help you at different times, or maybe you're just happier doing the grease eye directly. I can't remember how to spell grease eye, but if you look at grayscale painting, there are tutorials. I think it's Florent Fage on here. Let me see if I can Florent. Is that gonna send? There it is. Florent Fage. He's an oil painter. He can offer a number of different painting techniques from old masters, and then he will go through tutorials on how he does it and tells you how to do it. You might find that is helpful for digital art. I actually listen to all of it. I'll go and watch some oil painting tutorials. I'll go and watch digital painting tutorials, comic art, documentaries on old masters. Not too much at one time, not too much back to back, because you just can't take it all in. But I do look into a lot of different types of artists, because the overlap now in the way we do things, there's a bit of an overlap. For example, Cintiq, like a video Wacom, or Procreate, like iPad, is kind of traditional. Like, it's digital and traditional. It's a digital application on a digital platform. So you kind of need to, you've got the opportunity to take in both tutorials. That's all right, man. You're welcome. You're welcome. All the best with leveling up, but enjoy the process. Like, I was honest with myself. Like I said to Floating Disc the other day, I just said, hey, I'm not happy with my approach to writing and approach to comic book art and graphic novel, and I think it's this. I think this is the reason why. And I was honest with it. I was honest about what I did, a process that I didn't like. So we talked about processes, alternative processes, what the issue is, where I'm getting paralyzed and stuck, and then what might help. And we identified a different process, and all of a sudden I felt happier so early, so quickly. I was like, of course, that's a really good idea. That's a much different plan. I feel ready to approach that and give it a go. So yeah, if you're finding that you're really not enjoying something, question the process and see if there's a better one out there. People do enjoy their art. People who do well at art are enjoying it for some reason, and it's just, I think, because they've used one of numerous processes that have made them, that have empowered them. I'll give a bit of a line around there just to help define that. Pads. This is should be a little darker than what it is. So it's gonna just sort of mottle in that there. I am going to spend a bit of time to graphic novel work as well. So I will be doing digital coloring in the future, and I've just got to be honest about the type of digital color that I like, the type of results that I like, or if I just want to go black and white. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I don't know how much I need to adjust this side of it, so I'm going to do some more compositional support and then come across and do some more elsewhere to see what else I need to do to adjust the qualities of this. Just a bit of bold blue there where the light hits. Yeah, just a very subtle touch. A subtle touch of white at the high point there, just to get that sting in. Get that sting in the burning part of the exposure. Let's give this... I'm going to give this elbow pad a go now. Come in with the mid-tone brown, and the stance I'm going to use is... I'm going to go a little sketchy, as in like I'm sketching the rendering in. I know that that's actually very similar to just shading in general, but I'm using the point. What it means is just using the pointed part of the pencil to get the texture into it. I want to get texture. And there's this line of occlusion across the top here. This is the part where the lighting from all sources fails to light the subject, and that gives me an opportunity to scrub out of and add some tension lines in that leather from the tight point, so which is going to be towards that elbow there a little bit. And then I'm just going to do, right after this, I'm going to do the cool blue line that is shooting across the top here for some reason. According to my reference, I'm going to trust the lighted reference, the lit reference. And I'm going to try and employ just a little bit more base color where I'm seeing it. It's up the middle here. And there's actually the leather is sort of going both directions. I can see it getting pulled this way and then pulled across. So I'm kind of seeing a cross hatching in the leather itself sort of look. So I'm just going to deploy some of that. And then I can see some tension lines along the rim as well. So I'm just going to point sort of back towards the forearm there a little bit. There are just a couple of lines here as well, just scratch tension lines or scratches and that in the elbow pad on the reference image. So I'm just gonna scratch them in now, and then now that they're down, I can continue to sort of honor that detail as I get further into it. All right, I'm gonna grab my blue. This is what I did up here on the shell. It's got a bit of blue right next to the brown. So before I really start to put too much more in it, I'm just going to hatch back the other way. So I'm just using my hatching stance. Just regular old comic book hatching. And that's about it. And then it splashes down the bulging sections. So along the rim there, so the blue light's coming from this direction and warm light's coming from this direction. In general, that is a thing to, it's a creative choice. I like it. I like cool and warm light. It got popularized heavily during Blade Runner 2049. The lighting in that, the urban lighting, the bright purple, and the reds, and the orange scenes in Vegas. Really popularized this extreme sort of cool, warm lighting coming from different directions, and it's just given us such a great reference to consider when doing our own lighting. You don't just do light green to dark green for shadow. Consider if it's blue light, add a bit of blue into your light green, add a little bit of blue on the far side of the darkest, part of it, or then some sand or some warm yellow. Yeah, daylight versus artificial light, cool light versus warm. Is it daylight and tungsten? If you've done filmmaking before, daylight is a cooler light, tungsten light is a warmer one, but then you can also have artificial warm, artificial cool, such as an LED that's artificial. Can be very white, very neutral, very clinical, but then if you put a blue light on that, it can be very rich and mega vibrant, which is what's being used in here, is like a street light blue, or a moon night sort of like glow from a cold urban setting. And then he's got a warm light here, which might be like some natural tungsten bulbs at the front of a shop front or something, or a bar or a nightclub or something like that off to this side. I love noir lighting, and Alex Ross does as well. He does a fair bit of high contrast painting and also bounce lighting, where you see not just blue and yellow or warm and cool. He'll introduce other colors as well. I like seeing that, like if they're doing like a Killer Croc or something like that, like I don't know about Alex Ross has done Killer Croc, but you do some toxic bright green glow underneath him or something, and then some red glow from somewhere else. Just you can mix it up, have some fun with it. I'm gonna get some slightly darker blue here, and I'm gonna keep the pencils relatively sharp, not because I need it to scratch into this too much, but if I start to shade too much now, what's going to happen is it's going to soften off all the blue in all the lines and the detail in here, and I don't want to lose too much of that really, because the surface is a little rough. When you're doing digital, your pencil doesn't go flat on you. It doesn't get sharp and then go soft. It's always the shape that it is, which is actually a handy thing. If my pencils never went soft on me, that would be a great form of control. But that's not how traditional works. I'm just going to put a little bit of blue. You can try this though. Color theory is awesome. Florent Farge has some excellent color theory videos. I would recommend watching them because they will apply to anyone who's involving color and lighting into their artwork. It just gives you a really good idea that when you want to make something darker, being careful not to just add black or the same color, a darker but the same hue but darker. Look to use the opposite color in a darker version of the opposite color in order to darken it, and it can get really interesting that way. You're going to be doing a lot of photorealistic streets in New York in the comics, so you're going to use a lot of blue glow. If you want to balance it out, so like a blue glow from one side, and you don't want to go too warm on the other side, you can use more of a whiter neutral. If they're blue all over, that works as well, but you also want to create just a little opportunity. Like for example, if you've got a piece like this and the character's very shadowed and very sort of blue lit and cool tones, in the background what you can do is, even if it's just sort of blurred out a little bit, you might have like the lines, the some blurred warm light, or like a street sign or something that's the opposite. And what it does is it just makes things look quite balanced. And there's this photography reference where 5% warm color in a cool photograph is actually a pretty good balance. I think it's like 5 to 20% or something like that, 5 to 10%. So if you have if this is a very dark night blue cool scene, but then I have a little like a hotel, neon light in the background, and then just a slither of red or magenta or orange or yellow, just a little like sharp bounce lighting on this side, but the rest of him's blue. Bing! You're employing old masters photographic filmmaking compositional piece of mastery in there, that the person who likes visual storytelling, whether it's cinema or photography or artwork, they'll look at that and feel like this little spark of warmth, this little spark of mystery or something in there. It's like when you see a portrait the opposite, where someone's face is mostly in the light, and then there's this really dark side, like the light comes from here and it's all really dark, and then there's a slither of white blue light, like a cool bluey white pure light down this side, and it just makes them kind of look really sus and or really sinister, or they've got secrets or something's going on. What's this about? Using that 5% hard lighting or slither of polar opposite color is a really good little tool for making something have more than meets the eye. I really enjoy trying to create compositional elements that achieve that, which I'm doing now, actually. Just as we speak, I'm just trying to add some slithers on this side. It actually has a fair bit of a blue glow to that one. And I'm just sort of finding my way through it. I've got some sand here as well. This is quite the opposite, right? And I'm just gonna sort of scratch that into the white here. On the left side, where the warm light is. Up against the white on this side. All the way up. And I will do the arm next here, and that will help get me an idea of what level of adjustments I need to make to that. This is the line of occlusion down here, so the light that's coming from the left lights what it can see very well. When that light dies off, it goes into the shadow, and this side of the arm piece becomes dark. But then the blue light that's coming from the right side is bouncing off the other side and causing a shadow down the middle here. Who's my inspiration? Yeah, so I put in the description Andrew Wilson. Over 10 years ago, I saw him doing this, and it was the first time I saw colored pencil so vibrant and character portraits. He does mostly black tattoos now. He's a tattoo artist, but 10 years ago he was doing this stuff, just face portraits of characters, and I was like, wow, I've got to give that a go. That looks amazing. And in the next couple of months after that, I was doing character portraits. Very just A6 size ones, not A4. A6 and A5 size portraits. But yeah, I just saw it. I had to do it. It was just amazing. I thought he was so talented, and his choice of art supplies was really tasteful. It was the first time I saw colored pencil that wasn't like from primary school. Like, they were proper amazing, solid, vibrant colors. But there are other artists now who... There are a number of other artists that do exactly what I'm doing, and they probably don't even... They do it, various ones, and they do it even better, and they do bigger ones as well. It's all really just time, and you know, like, if you want to do other projects, you've got to sort of... Like, I don't want to be a fan artist for my life. It's just where I started, doing what I like, characters I like. A bit of line work bounces the fidelity, like the detail of your work. You get a little bit of refined lines in there. There's some sharp lines. It just makes it look real. So just consider that as well. So like, when you want to bring in some sharp lines, it adds some accuracy back into what you're doing. And real life is also very accurate. There's a lot of perfect resolution and perfect detail in reality. So worth considering. Really bounces. I'm just using a dark purple to do this work, not a black, not a dark brown or anything else. I'm just using a dark purple because it's a little bit more interesting than just dark brown, and it blends between that blue and the brown better than just using a brown or a blue. You can see the ambient, not ambient occlusion, but the occlusion here, as I'm putting a bit of purple into it, how it's just sort of working with the lighting, not fighting it. I'm just trying to think of other artists. Like David Finch is a comic book artist, mostly pencil and ink, but he's been learning painting and doing mixed media and doing amazing stuff as well. David Finch has a live stream on here as well. He's been a comic book artist for over 20 years. He's amazing. He's very encouraging, and he answers questions, and he's got a lot of tutorials on there that will get you far ahead if you keep on employing it. I've been listening and watching him for years and applying the lessons that I've learnt from him, all the fundamentals, attitude, you know, you name it, just trying to glean from his abilities. Yeah, David Finch, definitely. There's other artists, actually. Chris Stevens, I put his name in the link as in the reference as well. Chris Stevens, I think he does mixed media as well, and it is stunning. It's comic book characters and that, but it's so vibrant and textural, and his character poses and that are excellent. He does really good work. Marco Bucci. The name doesn't... No, I don't think that's him. I don't know where I might see him. His art is like Disney art, but if more photorealistic. Interesting. I'll see if I can find it on the Oh, okay. Digital, right. Yeah, he's got a lot of caricature in it, and a lot of what would you call it, impressionistic. So you can see a lot of the strokes and the texture in there. Yeah, right. No, it's the first time I've heard of him. Lighting study live stream with Marco Bucci. Yeah, I mean that's if yeah, he's doing some really nice work on the lighting as well. And then yeah, how he develops the original idea with lighting in mind. Yeah, definitely good. I mean, if they're offering tutorials and that as well, that's excellent. It's a good opportunity to get up and close with it. Yeah, he's also a YouTuber. Yeah, there you go. And that's the thing, is that these days there's a couple of masters out there who offer us an inside road to how they're doing what they're doing. David Finch was the first comic book artist I really came across. I got a book called The Future Is Now by an artist called Deathburger, he's quite well renowned in terms of, if you're into comic books or graphic novels and that, you probably know Deathburger and his style. There's a couple other people out there who sort of either work with him or copy that sort of style, because it's very cyberpunk. Clearly he's a fan of Jeff Darrow and Mobius probably as well, and branched off from, you know, a bit of like Hard Boiled and Jeff's other work and that. So I got a book by him from his Kickstarter, and then I went back to the comic book store after work one day, and I was sort of saying, hey, this is what I'm into. I would like to get into more comic art and sort of catch up to speed with what's happening in that space. But I don't want... I'm not interested in tons of panel and tons of text and sort of rushed work. I want to see larger... I want to see more detailed work. I want to see, you know, large pages of really, really thought out and really well executed art, like story on top of good art. And the guy said, yeah, how about and he gave me Batman Dark Knight New 52, I think it was 2011, and he's like, David Finch, they said, we don't have any Moon Knight here, but he's got Batman that's, yeah, it's really promising, like worth looking at. And when I opened up and had a look at it, I was blown away. And then years later, he ends up doing a stream telling all of us tryhards how to learn, how to develop. And and now he knows my name, he knows my art style, he's contributed to my development, and he's live every week or two, and not just doing comic art and penciling, but he's also doing mixed media. And it's just amazing that I got the chance to learn from him and him to know me and that. So yeah, no worries. I need a drink myself, actually. I've got some protein. All right, that's looking that's looking really rich. I'm gonna build some more detail around. Let's have a look at this forearm. All right, because it's in the light a little bit more, I'm just gonna grab this green apple, and then I'm just gonna do my reverse, or actually it's like the number 3. I'm doing it's like drawing the number 3, but C makes the backwards, makes the number 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. You won't really see much of it here, but what it's doing is building up the wax in the texture of his arm. Why that matters is because when I shade over it later, my additional shades and hues will bounce around on that texture. This is why the stance is so important, even when you can't see it too much up front, is because it adds a third dimension to the page that will help create texture for the surface of his arm in this case, for additional shades and hues. So it adds another dimension to his arm and other features. All right, forearm base tone in there. I'm just gonna check my reference. So it's mostly warm and brown. So the shadows are the brown. He's got like a little browniness in the shadows, and I think that's just the wash that Necker have put into the paint of the figurine in order to create the shadow, give the shadows just a little bit of taste, or the body form, just a little bit of taste, rather than just doing He-Man style, you know, just a molded figurine out of the plastic, and like, you know, the shape of the figurine just comes from the mold, not from the painting. So whereas Necker have actually painted different shades and hues over top of the plastic mold in order to create the form and the replication of the original Turtles, which is admirable. It's why I like their brand and why they're a successful toy company. So just dab, stipple off. There's some slightly darker parts there. So I found that the dark brown wasn't much darker than the chocolate or the sienna, but I am going to use it anyway because I'm going to be okay with a gradual build-up of shade. Cool. I'm just using a little block sharpener in a jar that I've had for 3 years now. You can use an electric sharpener as well, but if it's going to be longer and pointier than that, it will become very fragile. So just the old school cheap as chips block sharpener is all a dude needs, all an artist needs to. Okay, there is a vein that is coming across here. Just want to sort of catch that a little bit. some forearm muscles. Actually, the dark brown's working out really well. It's not one of Prisma's easier tones to work with. Like I think maybe they've worked with it, they've developed it or something, but it seems to be functioning a lot better now. But I am also more experienced. There's just certain pigments for different brands that just don't blend as easily, you know, like there's just something about how they're made to get the color with the materials that they have on hand and greens and browns can have that issue, but it's not a showstopper for me. Like, I'm gonna still buy it and then try and use it. Alternatively, you can always just try a different brand that in that one color that just lands, hits the beats. A little bit of shadow up this end here. I'm not going to go too big on the shadow just because it might make it appear to stretch the band, the wristband further back, and that's just going to look weird. I'll grab, you know, I could probably grab my Copenhagen blue, which is just darker than the electric blue. Thanks for hanging out, Red, as well. If you're unable to come back, appreciate your company. Glad that this helped you out. So I'm just going to use the electric blue for now and just add a little bit. And I'm just going to do like little woolly sort of circular sort of technique. That'll be my stance for this. Be careful not to push too much harder. And then just a little bit up here. Okay. I'm going to grab my sand. And I'm going to do C stance because I'm catching the bumps from the left side. So I'm going to draw around the bump like a letter C. And then I can sort of blend it and smooth it out a little bit and adjust things if I need to. It's the vein there. Sometimes I resort to just a circular sort of motion when I'm this far out. If I can't really get the pattern that I'm drawing with my stance, I'll just sort of resort to using a circular motion to create a zoomed out texture. We're seeing that I can't quite draw the accuracy of a certain shape or textural shape. And then what you can do, you can scrub a little bit, and what it does is it kind of like grabs and smears different sections of the texture you've already put in, and it creates a really nice surfboard wax. Not a bad surfboard wax, but a nice surfboard wax sort of appearance to the result. Now the arm is, fairly matte. I'm going to go back to the base color here. So it's, from this point of view, it's kind of a little dull. It's not really like shiny. Because that warm light sort of softens things up, whereas the cold light is quite sharp and bouncy. So I'm probably just going to look at blending some of that brown shadowing in to the base color, and making sure that it's not too rough, too dry and scratchy. This is just to help mute that rough, crumbly looking texture out a little bit. So I was going to go careful, because adding this layer of color down now on top of everything else can wax the page badly. But this starts to sort of laminate the color that's on the page, and it kind of starts to make it look illustrated, like it's a finished piece. Like when you've got dry pencil on the page and it looks a little untreated, a little primal, it's glaringly obvious. But when you bring in another layer of wax on top of that, and that way that every bit of color and shade and every little stroke that's on here has had at least 2 layers, you then have something that looks like it's been worked into the page and filtered, and yeah, I've been given the treatment, given the pass. I guess for those who might, another example might be like back in the day, like I don't know if you still use like much of Instagram's or its filters, photograph filters, but yeah, there's that idea of sometimes a raw photo just sort of doesn't cut it. It's not really, it's not processed, or if a photo that doesn't have much, or let's say you take a shot with a camera that just doesn't have a lot of quality to it, it's just quite raw, and then you add a filter to it, and suddenly there's a bit of clarity, a bit of vibrance to it, a bit more color, or contrast, some features. That's what adding a different layer of pencil to your existing layers does. It smooths things out, it builds up the quality, it makes sure it doesn't look like a bunch of ingredients thrown onto a table. To bring a little bit more of this forest green just into the brown there, just so that it's not skewing too far off of the skin tone I've already employed into Michelangelo. And then I've got Dahlia purple here. That will darken up just a couple of bits and pieces. What I said before about using additional layers of wax, of color, to sort of filter and treat and finish the look. You also, doing that, will lose a bit of detail, a bit of dexterity in the piece. So like I did earlier before with the arm pad, come back with something contrasting. So it might be a really sharp base color, or a really sharp dark or a really sharp highlight, and just let it know who's boss and what's what. So just add a little bit of clarity to things, and you will just bring the dexterity back into the piece, and that will make it that will make sure that it still has its identity after everything that you've done to it. It has not lost its identity. So that is looking fairly good. I think we leave the forearm there, and we just keep working our way along. So we can do the wrist, and we'll work our way up to the hand, and that will create a really good frame here now for the front shell, which actually does take up a fair bit of the facade of him. And to have that framing and that reference as compositional support for doing that is obviously good. If you jump from here to down here and then over there, and you just move around, like, do what you feel like you should do, but I would just say compositional support is called compositional support. It's a raw root word that helps you because it does just that. It helps you define and balance everything that you're doing. So I wouldn't you say you have to follow the limb around, you know, and follow this around like a train track, you know, but you might jump from doing this part to doing the shell, and then all of a sudden you've got a sample of the body and a sample of the shell that balances out, and then all of a sudden you have a style guide. You repeat that process through the rest of the body, and away you go. So I'm using the sketch stance that I used earlier on the elbow pad. The reference is my drawing is pretty similar to the reference in terms of lighting, but I do branch off in a couple of places just so that I can do things that I like doing with lighting, such as that line of occlusion down the middle between the two light sources. That's a favorite of mine, so I'm just giving that a shot. Even if it's not quite that tonal in the reference image. That little highlight on the trim there, I might even knock that out just to simplify the shape, but I'm just going to leave it until I get a bit more compositional support. So I remembered putting in some blue. I got some non-photo blue here. I'm still using either a hatching or a little rough sketching technique in the strokes of that. And just put a little bit on this side. There isn't much blue appearing from. Actually, it's mostly just up here and a little bit down here, and then because this tilts back up this way, it's getting warm on this side again, so probably got carried away there. I can just take some sienna and bring some base color back into it very, very lightly, and just sort of tone down the cool color. So just using my base color. And because I'm staying light on it, it's sort of like a dry, light scrubbing. It's not like a heavy erasing. And it allows that color to take over. It might even like push away or dust off the color that's underneath sometimes. It sort of digs it up on a micro level. Alright, we'll go dark brown like I said. In some of those crevices there, and I'm just gonna look at some of the little strokes and textures I've already managed to get into there, and then just turn that into my guides. So now I'm just gonna follow some of those fine lines with the sharpest point of this pencil, and what that's gonna do is bring some fidelity back into it and some realism back into the details of that feature. All right. I'm going to bring in some Dahlia purple to go even darker into some of those crevices. Just get the finer points, the finer lines of that, and we can sort of, the lines don't need to go like that much detail all the way to the top, but what we can do when we bring the lighting in, the highlights, is that we can actually just sort of wash out and overwrite some of those hard lines with the highlight color. So I've got my sand here. So I'm going to another extreme again. I'm going from the darkest part of, or almost the darkest, I'm going to bring a little bit of black in, to the lightest warm color, and I'm gonna catch the sharp points where the warm light is having its way. A bit of crumbly there because I'm pushing a bit harder. Make sure we use the brush. Okay. And I can use a bit of white to help out at the highest points of those. But what you can do is just sort of like push over that dark line, the shadow line a little bit. And what happens is it's literally blurring the lines, but the result you're getting is what happens when light bounces off a pretty vibrant surface, and then when that light comes back towards your eye in that diffused nature, it has that radiance and that glow off of the surface, and it sort of covers that detail, that shore lining. If you see some crumbs that are just sitting on there, they're stuck to it, and just use your synthetic paintbrush. Alright, there is some sort of strange shapes in there, but I think overall it's reflecting enough of the reference. I'm going to grab my rouge, my poppy red again. It's just like a Chevy orange. It's like a red, orange red, a 179C Pantone. And blend it back into the shadows there a little bit, like so. Because that's how I feel about it. And then I can boost the blues and blend them back into them. It's okay if it's in all reality, like the blues and the oranges and the browns and everything is actually very much just sort of mixed together, because if that's what's happening in the real lighting reference, you can do that in the artwork, and you'll just have to, the eye will just have to resolve what's going on as a result of the collision of those details. Might go back to my electric blue and use that in the same way I use poppy red for the warm side to sort of blend back in. And I'm starting to get into wax territory now, where it's gonna get harder and harder to actually put detail into this at all, because it's polishing the surface and making it difficult to contribute any more color to it. Like, it's saturated, right? What you can do though is come back with a sharp dark color and then just sort of go light on it, and you might actually find that it will just draw over top of it anyway. But certain mid-tone colors will just give up, like they can't do anything more for you. So now, once I'm at this end of the things, I can grab my black. And nice and sharp. And then only sort of really get in there where it's the darkest. I don't want to erase all that sort of purple in there, because that's just starting off a nice colored bounce. And I think what I would like to do is grab a sharp white here and get a really slight slithery type there. As well, and you can cut into the darkness with the white, and what it does is it creates like a polished look that's very indifferent to the darkest parts of the, like, it's just like, yep, this is a shiny surface. Doesn't matter if it's poorly lit, it will catch any light and send it back your way. So I'm just going to put a couple of indifferent white lines, and if the white pencil doesn't work, later at the very end we take some Posca pen, acrylic, paint pen, or even better, actually I think what we'll do is grab a short fine detail brush, liner, or not a liner but a short detailing brush, and do a bit of white acrylic paint here and there just to tidy up and refine it a little bit on some of these highlight points where white just won't get enough into it. We could also do the same for black. I mean, painting, that's the good thing about painting, is that you can really enforce what colors have to be where and how much detail they have, whereas pencils kind of like start off gradually creating a base color and a fill, and then it's like, cool, we're getting definition here, and then as you like get some sharper pencils and more detail and more contrast, the detail goes up and up and up, and then you get to a point where if the page has as much wax on it that it can take, when you add more wax pencil to it, the quality and the definition starts to fall off, and your ability to add more color and to define that starts to fall off. You can scratch off the wax with a tool, but I would employ the preventative technique rather than a cure, because once you bring tools, metal and stuff into your drawing, that's like advanced, when you're starting out, trying to use some of that can like metal tools and that to edit and adjust your wax to scratch it off, remove it, or erase that. It can get really messy, and you don't want to do a highly risky thing to a lot of work that you've already done. You're better off to maybe come back later with a bit of acrylic paint, and just like, we're talking like Warhammer application. We're talking about like, just grab a little bit on a little brush and just color match and dab and adjust and keep it simple. Don't go too far into the process. All right, I'm going to do some reverse. I'm going to do some like a little motley kind of stance technique, like little circles in that on the hand, because he's getting diminishing skin texture the closer he goes towards areas of his body that have more refined and smaller amounts of skin texture. These guys are pretty textural. If you buy the figurine, like all the way along, has this incredible bump to the whole process. Oh, that's also brown, that little bit there. Just gonna grab that while I'm here. It's like the brace, the arm brace here, actually has a little fold or something that shoots off at the front of the. So I'm just gonna catch that. It's very subtle. I don't know if you saw then, but just a little chip of white there was pretty bright. And then once I hit it with the brush, it just dug off the part that wasn't going to stick. I'm going to keep building up with that little motley sort of circular motion. And follow the form of the skin, the limbs and that, fingers. I just have to be careful that when I'm building the texture that it doesn't just like keep on building and building, and then all of a sudden I've got this massive divot in some part of his body that actually isn't there. So just keep an eye on your reference. Hey Red, welcome back. There's a lot of stuff like that now that people don't know. Established types of artists and works of art and that. I was born in '82, so I was lucky to grow up with in Australia as well. So He-Man aired, I think, from 1980, which I was too young to see, but it aired later in Australia, so I got to see He-Man like the first time, and so I got to see all the 80s cartoons, 90s cartoons. I got to see original, old school Disney, Mickey and Friends TV shows that were re-recorded onto VHS back in the 80s and 90s. I got to watch all that. I got to watch all the original Disney animations. Oh, no black. Purple. Actually, you know what? I might just go a little bit of blue first, maybe some brown. Yeah, I got to see all the original Disney animated movies. Obviously not in 1939 or whatever, but I got to see them screen on the big screen again in the 80s and 90s. I'm very fortunate to see a lot of old classical movies as well. Way back in the day. So pretty much like all the stuff that inspired Alex Ross is stuff that I've seen as well. Not just him, but also what inspired him are things that I've also seen. So like classic movie posters from the 30s and through to the 50s, and that I got to see a lot of that stuff, you know, in stores, in the video stores, and that I got to have the experience of renting movies from Blockbuster, and yeah, I got all these, and I think younger people now don't know what that was like, and they don't know the development of it. And it's not to say, oh, you need to be thankful for what you have now. It's actually, you can't ever go back in time to those times. So I feel sad in a way that I wish people had some of that experience, just some of those wholesome times where things were a bit simpler, more than anything, more than a sad for Alex Ross, more sad for people who just missed out, really. No, that's different. His son is Steve Ross, who has also done painting on his show as well for some time, I believe. So coincidentally, but the work ethic, I think, is there. There's a similarity of the work ethic and the type of quality they put into their stuff there. It's like when you get into painters who are like really trying to get something special out of their work, they're gonna have similarities. I think the only other similarity regarding the name is a coincidence, I think. I actually never realized that Beth had the same last name. Timber strokes in there. Got some beige. I'll just flick through a little bit of beige. Just a little hatch, scrubbing and that in there. bit. Get that purple again. Yeah, I'm quite grateful for the time that I've grown up in, because I got to see a lot of really cool things and a lot of different forms of visual storytelling. That's been very beneficial to my my growth and knowledge base. We're spoilt for choice, spoilt for influence. Almost got no excuse. So here's another example of just doing this nunchuck here. Yeah, an example of what's the color of nunchuck? Well, his are wooden. Wood is brown, but I've used sand, like a light yellow, a blue, sienna brown, purple, and black to do a wooden nunchuck, because that's what it looks like in a cool and warm lighting situation. And once you know that opportunity, it changes the way that you approach everything. I'm gonna throw some yellow up here on the knuckles in a dotted stippling type, sort of toady, froggy, turtley type technique. It'll wash out a little bit. Have I heard of the artist named Dave Gibbons? I have. When the floodgates opened for comic art and illustrated art, at a point there, after I discovered David Finch, I started collecting all Batman 52 stuff that all the volumes that he had worked on, and then I looked around for other of his work, and then I started to sort of chew into more of the art, not just not the comic book series, not the franchise, but the artists, and then more specifically the type of art that was out there. Because like once you've gone through the first, whatever it is, the first 4 volumes of New 52, they hand over the art to another artist, continues the series on. And it's actually did a very good job as well. And then you go, okay, well, let's just think a bit bigger picture here. What else is there? But what is it that I really like about this? What is it that I like about comic book art? And is it specifically comic book art, or is it just the type of art that you see in comic book art quite prevalently, but also elsewhere? And so your mind starts to open, your researching starts to open, and then you start to analyze artist after artist and technique after technique. Even if you only like one thing from one particular artist, you start to really dig into things. And so I found a lot of pillars. There is, David Finch, and then after that was Jeff Darrow. And then all of a sudden I realized the similarities between Jeff Darrow and Deathburger, or Josan Gonzalez. So Deathburger, Jeff Darrow. Jeff Darrow did the graphic work for The Matrix originally, back in the 90s. and he also did some other R18 or a lot of other R18 stuff like Samurai Cowboy and not Samurai Cowboy, similar sounding title, and Hard Boiled. And then you're saying, okay, there's a similarity between those two, and then you find out that Jeff Darrow was a student or apprentice and friend of Moebius, Jean Giraud, and then Jean Giraud came before all of these guys, and he did work on Alien and Blade Runner and I think Dune. And it turns out that Moebius is like one of the earliest modern graphic artists to actually define so many visual storytelling movies, graphic novels, comic books, and all their artists right back as far as the 70s. And so, like, Moebius I call the godfather of my artist influences, because of the original influence that he had on all the movies and artists that I am influenced by. You don't know famous artists, I'm not gonna lie. Todd McFarlane and Jack Kirby. Yeah, comic books is a really large world, and there are a lot of artists in there, and then a few of them are much more well known. I have watched McFarlane documentaries and interviews and stuff for a long time to sort of understand his mindset and approach to things, and I've learnt a lot from him as well. Yeah. I really liked Inkal of Jodorowsky and Moebius, and I've got Edina by, I think that's entirely by Moebius. Edina. Incredibly large and well thought out graphic novels with immense stories. Just sort of stippling here, keeping the stance approach going. You might chuck in just a little bit of light on the end of the stick there. It even has a quote, Todd saying it could be true evil. Just about like how extreme his work is or something. I think he likes a little bit of that sort of. I mean, he's an extreme guy, right? He's done work that stands out, and that's the method. That's the approach. Yeah, well, what I learnt from him was, so when he started doing Spider-Man, he started pushing Spider-Man to his limits in terms of his athleticism and acrobatic behavior. He's like, this guy's Spider-Man, like he's so flexible, like his identity and abilities were quite clear to the readers, and he was just like, well, let's just keep on pushing it, let's just make him super stretchy and super, you know, capable in that. And that when he did his version of that, they didn't marvel, like the guys that were editing it and controlling it were saying, like, you got to stop doing that, stop like going too far with this, like just keep things classic, like don't mess around with it. And it really worked because he pushed Spider-Man to they, you know, kids wanted they started growing up, and they wanted the characters to sort of grow up and become and develop more, not just stay the same in different circumstances. They wanted to see a bit more in the scheme of things, and that's what he developed. So they were like, okay, well, obviously the formula works, and we're only getting paid salaries or contracts from the big company, so let's go and build our own. And if you look at Spawn is just a more extreme version of Spider-Man, except that he borrowed from the Spirit, where a cop dies and then comes back to life, except that instead of going with hero, he went with an anti-hero because it's darker and more extreme again. So he went with that and then did the same full body suit, but he just added the Batman cape and the gothic themes, and borrowed from Spider-Man, he borrowed from the Spirit, he borrowed from Batman, and he created an anti-hero which was a rising form. You know, Wolverine is like one of the most popular characters from Marvel, and he goes between hero and anti-hero all the time, or mostly just anti-hero, right? So sometimes like he does bad things to bad people instead of using the law. He takes it into his own hands. So people really dig that, whereas Spawn has been angled to show even less mercy, and that's just kind of leaning into people who effectively just want to utilize comics or fantasize in that sense of the word, right? Yeah, Todd's anatomy and his character development is what developed who we all know him, you know, and his method, it permeates not only his artwork, but also his business. Like, he just does his toys are just more lifelike, or more truer to the original, and that's what set them apart. He did more expensive figurines than anyone else because he said the value was in it, and he revolutionized toy making. And now you have $45 figurines coming out by everyone, or in this country they're $45 for a figurine. It's like, I don't buy them. We can put some of that shell in now. Just looking at what we got here and how much time. I mean, I've just passed the 3-hour mark. So I'll finish up soon, but I'm just gonna do a bit of shell, hey? Just because we were talking about it earlier and supporting the contrast and the finish and that of the shell. So I'm just using some of that marker I put in earlier on just to guide me through the overall lighting. Put a little bit of color up here. I'm just doing the surfboard waxing technique, so that's my stance for this part. You remember a hater trying to make you hate bait videos, just saying that John Romita Jr.'s art is trash on YouTube, and that's not very well researched. Oh yeah. People said that about Rob Liefeld as well. You know what matters, really, is that Rob Liefeld can do whatever graphic art that he wants to do. So they can say whatever he wants, but he has the history and comic books with Marvel and Image and his own, and he has a lifetime of memories and success, and he's also got a hugely successful movie with Deadpool. And yeah, he had some wild comic book times and some wild reactions to some of it, because what he was trying to do was use Todd McFarlane's approach and applying a very extreme sort of result to Captain America and some other characters that he was working on that didn't work out so well. But the long story for him is that he lived a very fulfilled life. I've got a John Romita Sr. Signed copy of what was it now? I should remember. All my stuff's in storage downstairs at the moment, so I don't have it in front of me all the time. Just trying to think if it was Transformers 1 comic book. This has got classic era, Bronze Age artwork. Just so enjoyable to look at. I'm going to need some yellow because there's a bit more yellow in his shell than I first realized. So I'm going to go with this one here. It's not bright, it's yellow ochre. Do I have that pencil on here? Oh, I do too. Here we go. Bing. Yeah, they've gone head to head a little bit here and there, but ultimately, yeah, I know what happened back at Image. Things were getting too complicated for Rob, and he was going to go back to Marvel, I think, and yeah, they didn't want to just let him leave. They wanted to kick him out, and as a way of, you know, making an impression, a point, you know. And I think people, good people or bad people or neutral people or potentially better people, make decisions back in the day that just wasn't necessary to do, and they look back on it and go, you know what, that was petty, I shouldn't have done that. Should have just let the chips lie and move on. Let things, everyone, if you can do what you want to do without being limited by someone, you don't need to waste your breath or your effort reacting to them. And I think that's what happened back at Image in the last days of that union, and people had to do things that were unnecessary, and that it's something you have to live with at the end of the day. In your life, you have to resolve that. I think they're on okay times now. Like, they've caught up at conventions and they get along just fine. But yeah, there was some unnecessary things And ultimately, they haven't lost. Like, Rob's got a successful trilogy for Deadpool, and he can make comic books anytime that he wants. He's financially free. He's got unlimited amount, or like a ton of like incredible releases that are also highly valuable. His signature's worth something, you know. So, pretty good run. It's like when people, criticize Fast and Furious franchise, and they go, "Oh, what a joke! It's just stupid now." And it's like, but it doesn't matter to Vin Diesel and his friends. They get to make movies for a life, and they're financially free, and they're wealthy, and they can take care of their families. And the guy started out making movies for $20,000 or something. Like, started with nothing, and now he's got everything that he wants. And I'm not saying he's a great guy. I'm just saying it doesn't matter what people can argue that their art is rubbish or crap or whatever, but it don't matter because they're having a great life, doing what they want with their friends. What a dream. I think you find too, like, a lot of critical people or haters actually aren't living the dream, or their dream, or they don't have one, or they'll give you a bunch of excuses why they can't live the dream and why no one else should have dreams if they can't figure it out, you know. So we're in a place where we're ultimately, in my world, I don't live in a stone age, so I don't have people coming around with clubs trying to hit me on the head because they're jealous. Nothing really stops me from doing what I like doing. I hope that's the same for you. Alright, mate. No worries. Worth thinking about, guys. I've said that's been part of my I guess we'd call it just personal development and commentary when I was streaming on Twitch, and it's still a part of what I consider now, and that is like, you just don't need to waste energy on certain things in life that are that would just do nothing but take from you, you know. Like, you have recognize your freedom and embrace it. I mean, today's Anzac Day in Australia, recognizing the efforts of and the loss and the cost of war, and those who went to war for the freedom of Europe and the democratic world, the democratic governance of countries throughout the world. You know, we went to war against the authoritarians and the totalitarians and the tyrants and the bullies, and we won. And we still have stuff happening today, but a lot of the peace and freedom that we do have in the world, it's not completely peaceful right now by a long shot, but what peace we do have came at a cost. And if you're being affected by bullies online, or just think about how little power they have when you're not giving it to them, not giving them your time of day and your energy in that. Because they're all dipping their toe back into that same mentality that started several wars years ago. And you can defeat them now, not by having to go to war, but by just switching it off, by ignoring the notifications, by blocking them on your channels, you know, like just you can defeat that aspect of these guys. It can be compoundingly. It can make your art, if what you really want to focus on is you and your art and your future, and that and just having the brevity of life that ultimately we kind of have. You really ask yourself last thing I'll say, ask yourself if you really need to give unworthy people the time of your life. I'm going to warm up that little bit of chest plate here. I cooled off a second ago because it's just not beating the right way. Alright, I mean, just thinking about how that might have contributed the compositional support. Sometimes you don't notice it, that once you've done all this, it makes that so easy that you don't really have to think about it all that much. But I think it worked out. Was that difficult? I don't know. I don't think so. Okay. Alright then, let's just accept it and move on. And then once I've gone over the rest of the shell, I can balance out the whole shell in terms of its fluidity as a whole one piece, like as a shape, and the tonal qualities and the rendering of it, just in case I've gone a little too, you know, unbalanced here and there. A second, just checking my notes. Alright. And we'll, you know, now that I've done the second episode for this process, I can do more, and they're quite easy to access. Just by continuing it from where we left off. What did I just use for the other side? I think it was this. Was it a little bit of orange, or was it? I don't remember now. I'm just going to use this mineral orange on this side, and that will probably be it for us, because just for this as a resource, like I can keep on drawing, but just for this as a resource, we don't really want to go much over 3 hours, because that is you're gonna start to get a little fatigued and a little tired. And I'm just holding the pencil quite far back and just doing a little like waxing there, surfboard waxing. Just check my reference. There's a little bit more to sienna brown, so that's quite dark, so I'll just go easy with that. I want to make sure I capture that stark bandana shadow that's on there. It's looking good. And I'm just going to sort of polish in this darker sort of mid-tone up here Shell. Cool. And then I'm going to get that yellow in, because that's very much the base tone for this whole thing. And what this yellow is going to do now is it's going to do what I said earlier about filtering the quality of everything here. So it's going to, because it's a second or a third color to the area, it's going to smooth off and solidify the finish and the color all at the same time. And it's like adding a filter into your photo to sort of give it a couple of different qualities to it. So you can see it gets quite rich. I'm just going to scrub in right on the edge of the pencil there, like that, up there, because it's a very fine area. And all the texture that I've already put in there is affecting how this yellow works out. This smoothing color. So even though I'm just I'm not really using a stance at all, I'm just doing a mottled finish. It's picking up all the texture that I've already put down and working it and smoothing it and blending it and adding more sort of organic, natural tones and effects. In there. So yeah, there's a little bit more of a highlight up here. I'll get my sand. So I'm just going to sort of wax on, wax off sort of effect up here, scratch out a little bit of the darker colors, and then get some white and sort of do the same thing right on that corner there. Get some of that shape in, that shell shape. I'm not going to do like a solid scrub into the I'm just going to do like a little like broken dashed sort of etching scratchy sort of thing, and then a little bit of polish towards up here just to smooth it off, and that's just to make sure that I don't just come in and annihilate all that textural work I've done with a bright colorless pencil. And I'm just going to add just a little bit more etchiness to this side of it, just so that there's a little bit of a bridge between the two quarter shells. Just a little bit brighter up here, just to say, hey, like the way that the light bounces off the shell at that center point, the lower middle of the collar there, is similar enough. It's not contrasting, it's not too different. Brush off the excess there. Kind of got a little polished shell sort of look to it. I think that finish is a really nice sort of real. It's both real and illustrative sort of finish to the shell that I think makes it look a little naturally hard as it should be, at the same time being consistent with the rest of the work that's already been done. Got that line of occlusion down there, so I'm just going to make sure that that doesn't get cut or rubbed out. You might just add a little bit more up the side there. You got to be careful not to go overboard. If you like what you're seeing, it might be something you can do more of. However, just be cautious that more isn't always better. Going to put a little bit of poppy red into over top of the black there, and what it'll do is just add just a little illusion, just a little bit of what do I call it? Like I guess like an ambient occlusion as opposed to just occlusion into that space. You can kind of see it as very subtle. And it just means that black ain't black. Like the shell in the shadow is not necessarily just outright dark, you know, like, and colorless. Like there's a little opportunity in there. I like this bounce lighting coming off between the shell and the shoulder piece, the elbow pad there. A little Frazetta sort of feel to it. I don't really feel like to add too much more into this. Like I could use this poppy red to add just a little bit of sunset sort of tone into the shell. I don't want to go too overboard with that. This darker than yellow base color will mean that I have to put the yellow back over top of it again, because it's a darker, scratchier color, which means it looks a little raw. So I have to bring the yellow back in to filter it, to smooth it out a bit more again. Towards the edge of this corner here, just the edge there, you can just sort of scrub over it just a little bit like that. Oh, my pencil's breaking. And what it does is it blurs it and just sort of says like it's a little far away to be sharp. It's gonna help it out. I've lost a little bit of shape there. It's alright, I probably don't need to... This pencil's tip's gonna break in. I'm gonna try and get some use out of it. I don't like throwing pigment away too quickly. I'll just wait for it to fall apart. There is a little bit more shell on the end there. I'm just gonna grab some of that poppy red on the sharp end, make sure. There we go. It looks a little, anatomically a little funny. I think my original sketch was just a little out of place. I wasn't paying enough attention. It's not a showstopper. I'm just gonna sharpen this. Actually, I bet you this color's not the best one for it. Sharpen some beige. And that'll blend back into the page. But I'm probably better off using a warm, very light warm brown. That's cool. Gray. Sorry, a gray that's similar. A cool gray. Or sorry, a warm gray. Man, why am I avoiding the term? I might not have it. I think I've got these two, so I only have like half and half. Is this a warm gray? Yes, it is 10%. I need like a 30% warm gray to do this right. Yeah, I'm probably not going to mess around with that too much, just because this is a 30% cool grey, which is not... I guess it's better than nothing. Just a little editing there, just to help out the edge of that. That's all good. All right. Yeah, no, it's looking good. Like the more you do, like the more you do, the more information you already have on the page to reference as you're moving along. So I think it's coming up. I think it's coming up well for not doing any colored art for. I don't know how long it's been now. Just trying to think. which was the last one I did. I was actually working on Mad Max Furiosa. Alright, and yeah, I could keep toying around with this, and I might do that. But for the stream, we'll finish up, guys, because we need to limit the amount of study time, or else, yeah, you just don't want to get fatigued and then start cutting corners. And you know, like, sometimes when you're getting tired, you often get a little tired at a little bit at a time, and before you know it, you're tireder than you really realize. But you start making mistakes, and it's just not what you want after you've put all the effort in. So just, yeah, don't let your good work get foiled. By fatigue. Alright, that's today's work. If you want to check the stream video description, it has all the information in there from today. So links to, actually don't have the paper in there. That's, once again, that's Strathmore toned grey, and all the other supplies are in there, including the figurines, the artists that I've referred to, or at least some of them. Their links, the music today supplied to streamers for free, strike free by Fixt Music, Fixt. Check out their music. They've got a massive amount of music catalog and different genres, mostly synth, techno, hard music, metal. You'll see new metal. Bit of background on me, and also some storytelling in the description as well, of like where this sort of came out of, this type of artwork for me. But we'll be back. We'll do more, like seeing that we've got this set up. The detail seems to be coming through on the camera okay, and we've got the stream in place, and the art, most importantly, the art is progressive, so that allows us to work through this piece at a time. It does take time. Like, you don't really do something like this in a 3-hour stream. You could probably go quite fast and get, sweep over all the skin tone, sweep over things, and try and do it quickly, see if you can do a speed race. Maybe we'll do that in the future. We'll do a different character, and we'll just see if we can do the whole thing in a 3-hour setting. Obviously, to be very fast talking, very fast drawing, just out of interest, but generally it takes, an A4 piece is like a 20-hour. Or a full character will take 20 hours, or whereas a full-size head will take between 20 and 40, depending on how much detail's in there. So we'll probably see this guy through to the end, and we'll do the last bit of the artwork on the stream as well. So keep an eye out for that. If you wanna keep up with it, you guys know what to do. It's obviously a running show on from Twitch over to YouTube. So yeah, just you've got your subscribe and notifications options there, and then we are all set. So all the best, guys. We'll see you real soon. Love and peace. Stay away from toxicity. Catches.
I don't